Well, where do we start?
What were we talking about a minute ago?
Like the tons of short form videos
Oh,
or
yeah.
the
People that
assets.
struggle with content.
Yeah.
So I meet people like that all the time. They're like, how do you find all the time to get all this content? Do people ask you that?
Yeah, I mean, like 5 times a day, I get 2 questions. One, what type of videos do I make? And two, like, where do I start?
Yeah.
And so like we were just talking about having a whole folder of like all these different assets, whether it's like
Right.
you're hitting the gym or whatever. So we do that on a short scale at Short Form Empire. So I give people 3 folders: raw folder, finished clips, and then client assets. And I'm like, listen, put as much content in there as possible. So if I get like, a guru or a coach, whoever trying to sell a course, I'm like, put pictures of you in your car in there hitting the gym and all this stuff. So when we make content and they're talking about that, we implement it instead of like some random guy on like Shutterstock.
Yeah.
And it makes it more personal.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've met a lot of people like in the videography space that like they're great at the craft and the art part of it, but they're terrible at the logistical direction of guiding the content creators.
Yeah.
Like you just said something that I just haven't even thought about. Like, why would I not have separate drives saved and like just dump stuff in there?
Right.
I mean, there might be a time when I'm like injured, and not be able to shoot a bunch of content, or maybe I want to spend a 30-day sabbatical with my family. And if I got 3 different categories of content in there that some short form editor can go back and just pull from, I bet you so many people are not like categorizing and keeping that stuff in an organized fashion, and they're going to regret it.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing too is people just make content to get. And so they're not in the mindset of like, oh, my story, my journey, my path that I'm leaving behind has value. Therefore, they don't document it. They're just like, here's the 3 ways to do this and do that and do that. And it's only to get, not to give. And so they're not even in that mindset. It's more of a scarcity mindset, not abundance.
How do you bring up a good point. So I can scroll through my feed, and I'm in the real estate, finance field. So my whole news feed, that's what it is.
Right.
I look at my wife's news feed. It's like there ain't no realtors, lenders, whatever. And the reason being is she doesn't want to look at the listing. She doesn't want to look at you selling her something. She doesn't want to hear about how great interest rates are.
Right.
How do you get somebody to shift from that mindset? Because people do ask me that all the time, and I struggle with explaining it. Like, stop with the call to actions directly in what you're doing. You've got to think like what you're talking about, like in an abundance mindset. How do you get people there?
Well, I think it's more from the heart. It's about a paradigm shift. So I like to use this analogy, not saying that my content's the best way to do it, but there's other kids my age that run social media marketing agencies. You go to their account and it's like 3 videos a day of why they're great and why you need me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but where's your story? People don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And they're not going to know that unless they see your story. So they're always making content to get. And you just talked about the video I did on the bridge.
Yeah.
Well, I can make content every single day talking about here's how to go viral. Here's the best hook.
Right.
But I know I would be getting from that. So that's why I made a video talking about my chronic disease, my heartbreak and stuff. And I kid you not, I had like 5 DMs after that. People saying, yo, I have a chronic disease, never told anyone.
Right.
And they just start opening up.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have got that from like, here's why you need short form videos.
Yep.
So it really has to come down to a paradigm shift, and not everyone's willing to do that.
I think that once you start doing it and you're experiencing that, it's motivating, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, it's not about us. It's just, it feels good that you're giving something to somebody and freeing them of something.
Yeah.
Like I've talked a lot about, I don't like hide it from the fact that, I had a lot of trauma issues repeated in my life, actually 27 different cases of trauma, between that and 45 years old that I had to deal with. And I can't tell you, every time I talk about it or I say something about it, the messages and the text that I get, but yet we still jump on our social media and we talk about our business and our product, and we keep our personal life separate, and we keep our dark things that we've gone through in our life confidential. Like, we shoot the HopeDealer podcast, and it's like the one thing I want to help people understand is, what's your story?
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge that you've overcome in your life? Like, what's something that you're proud of that you overcame that was a tough moment?
It goes back to that video. So I was in almost a 2-year relationship, and it started to go south just for a number of reasons. But at the same time, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And the problem was, over those 2 years, all my identity was in that girl. So emotionally, physically, even spiritually in a sense. And when the only thing that I put my identity in was gone, I had nothing. I
Right.
literally had no purpose to anyone at the end of the day. Um, and I remember where I was. I was in my bedroom at my mom's house, and I just sat there, and I don't know where this came from, but I wasn't like, all right, why God? Why is this happening? Why me? It was
Right.
like, okay, and I can't do anything about it. So where and how do I funnel my energy into things that'll make me greater? And I think right then and there, that's the biggest thing I'm confident about is I chose delayed gratification versus
Yeah.
temporary satisfactions.
Yeah.
So,
Don't we all need those moments or those people in our life that say, okay, what are you going to do about it? So I went to engineering school because I thought that's what I needed to do. I thought
yeah,
like I'm going to get a degree. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. I was proud of that. So I just did what I thought, like, pick a profession off the shelf, engineer, that sounds good.
yeah,
And 2 years into it, I was like, this is not what I want to do. So I transferred, colleges. I went to MTSU. I changed into a field that like I wasn't really super passionate about. I just changed honestly to change something. And I was 1 month away from graduating and I was waiting tables at Demas's.
hmm
And I had gone on a job interview for environmental science at Vanderbilt. I thought like, this Vermont country boy's like, man, I'm going on a job interview at Vanderbilt. I thought I was hot stuff.
yeah,
So I parked near the hospital that ended up getting out, going in like puffed up chest. Hey, I'm here for a job interview. They said, well, where? And I said, environmental science. They're like, oh, go out the building, walk down the sidewalk, go around the side. There's a green dumpster. Walk around that. There's a door. You'll see the sign. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's like, starting to go down a little bit.
yeah,
So I walk down that sidewalk. I go around the green dumpster and I see one of those metal doors that's got the wire in the glass, and it said Vanderbilt Environmental Health and Safety. So I pull that door open. It's like really crickety. And I go in and like, I shit you not, it's like a concrete hallway with like flickering lights. And I walk in, it's like damp. And I look to the left and I'm like, there's a guy standing there in this like, almost like a janitor's closet. And I said, I'm here for the job interview. My name's Shawn Kaplan. He goes, yeah, nice to meet you. Johnny Vanderpool. I still remember his name to this day. And he's like, let me show you around, and you can tell me if this is something you think you want to go to the next step with. Well, he proceeded to bring me to like these places in the hospital where I would be responsible for autoclaving body waste, body parts, syringes, medical waste. And oh, by the way, the starting salary was $26,000 a year. I was deflated.
yeah,
And the reason why I bring this all up was I went back that night. I had to work at the restaurant. And Miss Demas, who's, she's passed now, but she was a great mentor in my life. I'm sitting back at the bus station waiting for a table to be sat, feeling bad for myself. And Miss Demas comes up. She goes, what's wrong with you? Like she just knew. And I said, well, Miss D, I said, I think I went to college for 6 years to just find out that I don't want to do what I got my degree in. And she didn't say anything at all, Nick. Like, other than this one thing. She looks at me and she goes, what are you going to do about it? She didn't say why. What are you talking about? I want to feel
yeah,
bad with you, whatever. She just looked at me and she said, what are you going to do about it? And that was one of those moments like you had. And right there in my brain, it shifted. And I was like, yeah, you're right. What am I going to do about it? And I said, I think I'm going to get into real estate. And she said, well, let me introduce you to somebody. And she took me to someone in the restaurant that was there sitting. And he was sitting with a mortgage guy. There was a real estate
Crazy.
builder, developer, and a mortgage guy. And he looks up at me and he's like, you seem like a pretty sharp guy. He goes, you're dressed well. You ever thought about selling mortgages? This was in year 2000. And I was like, I don't know what a mortgage is. I don't want to sell insurance. He goes, nah, come out and see me the next week. And I was off and running after that point. And that's how I got into mortgages. But I had that moment where it was like, what are you going to do about it?
yeah.
Right? How do you think that people can overcome that, feeling of, hey, I have a choice to feel bad for myself right now and be a victim of my circumstances, or I have a choice to say, all right, this is what's happening. What am I going to do about it?
I mean, I'm a firm believer that the Holy Spirit kind of gives us a choice right then and there because you
Yeah.
kind of answered the question. You're questioning it. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
It just comes down to what you do with it, right? And I think a lot of people know they need change. They know they need to change their atmosphere, their mindset, their habits, but they don't. But the fact that they know they need to do it is the first step, right?
Yeah.
So I think it really comes down to that. Like for me, So emptiness sparks purpose, right? But it's what you do with that purpose. Do I funnel that purpose and energy into the temporary satisfaction, even like, oh, feel bad for myself, that's temporary? Or do I say, okay, and start funneling it to rewiring my brain? My brain was always in that relationship, like thinking about that 24/7. I'm like, what do I think about now?
Yeah.
And you have to let those neural paths create it. And I think if you let the Holy Spirit lead you, it's going to lead you to the right spot, 100%.
You are a testament to that. The quality that stood out about you and at your age and the growth that you have in your life compared to your peers was when you reached out to me. Like many people would not do that.
Right.
And you were like, I just want to meet, want to, know more about you and what you do. And I was like, I felt honored. And then you came out and I remember asking like, so, what do I need to do for you? And you were like, I don't need nothing. I just want to learn,
Absolutely.
And like that alone, just putting yourself in the circumstances. And now we end up here and the friendship that we're all developing. It's like, I just wish we could teach that to more kids, more people coming out of school, more people trying to find a new place in their career. Because do you believe like we're going to have some sort of big, huge, massive like identity crisis, like with everything progressing so fast? Like, do you feel like you're going to find more and more people like asking themselves, who am I? Like, who's my identity? I've been doing this for so many years. Now what do I do?
I think we're already there, especially with teenagers, because I went to private Christian school for like all my life. When COVID hit, I went to public school to do college and high school, which I dropped out of. It's kind of ironic. And once again, this is kind of when I was going through all that stuff. And what I did is two things. One, I just sat back and watched everyone at lunch, watched how the teachers act, how they responded to people, how the students, why they were getting into fights, all this stuff. And what I realized and what I saw is that everyone was just searching and they weren't attracting. And I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
And when I was going through this stuff and going into my senior year of high school, I told myself, so I went through different phases. The first one was take the risk or lose the chance. So when I went through all that stuff that summer, went to my senior year of high school, I said, all right, take every chance possible. I was socially awkward. So I said, okay, taking a risk for me is raising my hand and talking to the teacher, or staying 5 minutes after class and talking to them, or like not putting in my headphones and looking down. That's a risk for me. And I know something greater is going to come out of it. So it was take the risk or lose the chance. And that's when I started picking up the camera, filming for my high school. And at that point, it became stop chasing and start attracting. So I found my natural inclination, which was videography and ultimately capturing stories for people. And I built that up and I was able to attract. I didn't chase anything. I even went to the parties in high school, but I was the kid behind the camera. Yeah. I never drank once. I never did any of that stuff. I didn't need to because I knew who I was. So it's about taking risks and figuring out who you are, because I hate when people say, go find yourself, go find yourself. How do you find something that doesn't exist? You have to create yourself. And that's what I did. I took risks, created myself. And once I figured out who I was, obviously through Christ and through godly things, I then attracted people to that. So with that said, I think teenagers have to start taking risks, but risks that don't necessarily harm them. It's risks that pushes them forward because there's no growth in comfort, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what it comes down to.
And that's how short form empire has basically been birthed.
Yeah, I can give you the quick elevator pitch about that.
I want to hear about it. No, seriously.
So it was in my junior year of high school. So from February to like May is when the relationship started dropping. The chronic disease was increasing. Everything fell apart. And it was that summer when I was alone for 2 months that I was just in my thoughts. And the only thing I could do was just mow on my grandma's farm. But I think that saved my life because I was just in my thoughts all the time, in a good way, just like letting God speak. And I kid you not, every thought that came to mind, and it was mostly towards that relationship, wrote it down. I wrote down like 16,000 words in a week. I would mow, stop, write it down, mow, stop, write it down. And what I didn't realize is I was unearthing my subconscious, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I just let my subconscious come out, and that's when take the risk or lose the chance came about. And I, like I said, went into my senior year. I'm like, I'm going to start talking to people, putting myself out there. But during that summer, I just picked up my phone and started making TikToks of nature. It wasn't like me dancing, of course.
Yeah.
No one wants to see that. But it was like of nature, of people. That was a lot of content I made was just of people at the park and stuff. And I just it made me feel a certain way. I can't even explain it. So I did that, and the kids at my high school somehow saw it. It was showing up on their feed, and they're like, you should film some sports stuff. It's like, I've never done this before, but take the risk or lose a chance.
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen?
Right.
And I made a video for the girls' soccer team, and it was terrible. It's still out there to this day, but they loved it. And I was like, what the heck? Like, this feels good.
Yeah.
Not because look what I've made, like, look what I can capture for them.
Right.
And it was about making them look good. And I
Yeah.
just found so much joy in that. So I kept making those videos. I started to learn and grow my talents a little bit, and it started blowing up even more and even more. And now other high schools were seeing it, and it blew up so much that the parents of the student athletes were seeing it. They're like, I need content for my business.
Yeah.
And that's where it got big. Now I'm like filming a prosthetic company commercial
Yeah.
that like made the news and all this craziness. And I was like, what is happening? But I just kept doing it and kept doing it. And during this time is when I started networking like crazy. Take the risk or lose a chance. DM all these people, go to all these events. And I just kept getting myself out there. And that's when I saw there was a whole nother world. Like college was not going to be on the radar. And I just started telling people this week. MTSU offered me $30,000 in free college.
Really?
And I turned it down.
Wow.
Because I knew that's not what God had for me.
Yeah.
Because I would have been in their schedule, under their agenda. Not that it was a terrible thing, but I knew there was more out there. So I graduated high school, and I just knew I didn't want to go to college, but I was trying to figure out, how do I scale what I'm doing for everyone? I want to show everyone stories, but also monetize it. And it was like June or July, and I got a DM from a football coach at my high school. He's like, there's these 2 NFL players in Nashville. They need a videographer, photographer behind the scenes. I was like, all right, what 18-year-old hangs out with NFL players every week?
Yeah.
So I did that. Obviously wasn't the best environment for me, but it was one of those things where I humbled myself and just watched them, watched how they talked, watched how they operated. Why did this work? Why are they talking about this? And this was the time when podcasts started doing short form videos,
Yeah.
clipping the funny, intriguing, controversial moments, putting captions, B-roll over it, and posting it. It's like, have you guys done this? They're like, no. I was like, I haven't either, but let's try it. So I went through all of their content, clipped it on my iPhone, edited it from my thumbs, and started posting short form videos. In 90 days, took them from 3,000 subscribers to 100,000.
Wow.
And their ad revenue from $70 to $7,000 a month.
Then you knew you were onto something.
I knew I was onto something. And during that duration, I only got paid $100, which I didn't even want anything.
Right.
But I figured it out right then and there that this is where it's at. So I had $6,000 to my name. I bought courses, invested into mentors, went to events, dropped all of it. And from August of last year to November, I just studied, and I was a sponge, and I learned, and I failed so many times.
Yeah.
And then I landed my first client, $1,500 retainer.
Yeah.
It was cool, whatever.
Yeah.
But then I was editing all that content myself, like 3 videos a day, posting it on all the platforms for them. So that's when I learned to build a team. Then I got a few more clients. And a lot of people don't know this too. I had enough money for 1 month's worth of rent at my dream high-rise apartment. And I bought it. I was like, let's do it. Now I got a fire under me. I have to keep pushing.
Right.
And then next thing I know, I had like a 5-figure week, and it just kept scaling. But with that said, it's not about the money. It's not about me scaling. What I found is I love taking people from pain to purpose,
Right.
but through content and sharing that story.
Yeah.
And we've generated over 100 million views for our clients in the last 9 months.
Wow.
And I love talking about that. Not like, oh,
Right.
look how great we are. It's like hundreds of millions of people are impacted, whether it's real estate or podcasts or
Right.
even crypto, whatever it may be. So that's like the little elevator pitch.
That's pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
And to think, like, again, it's not about the views, but you're in the more eyeballs that see something, the more chance you have to create a pivot shift in their life.
Absolutely.
It could be all the way to saying, you know what, he is right. You know, I've got to say no to some things that are good to be able to say yes to some things that are great.
Right.
You have that quality. Multiple times I've heard in your life, could have taken something and you said nope. Like, and then you go and you're like, I'll help out these guys, for, don't even know if I'm going to make any money out of it.
Right.
There's a Hollywood actor. I don't remember what his name is. He's a skateboarder, but he's also really well-known skateboarder, but he's also on a lot of TV shows. You'd recognize him if I told you, but I met his videographer and I was like, well, how'd you get a gig with him? And he goes, well, somebody said he needs somebody to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
So I drove 7 hours to meet with him. ended up sleeping on his floor. I don't even think he paid me, for it, but then it opened up a door
Absolutely.
somewhere else. We live in a world of instant gratification.
Yep.
And it kind of sucks because so many people are like, what's in it for me?
Mm-hmm.
What's in it for me? And you would have never made it that far if you had that mentality.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to have a fine line of like knowing who you are and your worth. But it's all about, the only thing I learned in college was opportunity costs. And I actually failed macroeconomics, which is funny. But the thing I took out of that was opportunity costs. You have to look at, okay, if I do this side or this side of it, what's the pros of it? Does it outweigh? And so when I was taking the risk every single time, I looked at it, okay, if I sit back in this event and watch and don't put myself out there, it could lead to X, Y, and Z. So literally any situation, any client I reach out to, any door I get into, I think of that opportunity cost. And a lot of people might not understand it, and I hope they do one day, but it's spirit led.
Yes.
It's not where I'm like, oh, I want to do that. It's like, I just do it.
Right.
And, that rolls out. I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
So what is hope to you?
Hope is dreams. Hope is a new life.
Mm-hmm.
Hope is a chance. It sounds kind of silly, but like growing up, I remember some moments that really stood out. Like one of them was going to the grocery store. We were on food stamps. We were on WIC. And I would just always ask for like the Captain Crunch, the Apple Jacks, the Lucky Charms, right? And I just got told no over and over and over. And it was like, we got to buy the Cheerios. We've got to buy the, Corn Flakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember having hope that, well, if I work really, really super hard, if I gravitate towards people that will help me, if I'm just really kind and have good manners and put effort into something for a long time, obediently in one direction, then it's not about the money. It's not about the success. It was that I have hope that I'll be able to do these things and I'll have these things one day.
Absolutely.
And that hope came from, what hope means to me, to answer your question, is my mom used to work 3 jobs. I would sit with my grandmother. She'd come in and plant me down with my grandmother at like 8 a.m. in the morning or 7:30 a.m. And I'd sit with my grandmother and we'd watch Price is Right, Family Feud. And she would just sit there and she would say her rosary on one side and the other side she'd be patting my hair. And if she didn't say it 100,000 times, she probably never said it once, but she'd just say over and over, she's like, you're so smart. You're so handsome. You can do anything that you set your mind to. And we just sit there, rock. And I now look back on that moment, Nick, and what she did was she instilled hope in me, and I heard it over and over and over and over. So that's what hope means to me. That's what dealing hope means. My grandmother was the ultimate example to that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
We out of time, or are we good?
Intro for episode 2. So.
Oh, this was a whole podcast? I didn't even know.
Yeah, heck, we might as well, because I kind of took over. We didn't do short form content.
Okay, why not?
So
the whole thing
called.
Yeah.
So what's the podcast that you want to start?
So there's a podcast that I'm going to start called the Called Higher podcast.
Called Higher.
Right. Because when I was at my lowest, I felt as if I was called higher, but I didn't know where to go. It was like a big fog, but there was something inside of me. That emptiness was sparking that purpose, felt as if I was called higher, didn't know where to go. And it took months and days, and it's going to take years ultimately of listening to people, consuming things, investing into myself to get there. So the reason I want to do it is God has blessed me with a fairly big audience at my age so far, but a lot of them, the 95% of my audience is 18 to 24,
Wow.
which blows my mind.
Wow.
But they're all people or individuals that want to be great. They want to make money. They want to leave an impact. They feel as if they're called higher, but they don't have an outlet. And I was blessed enough to create that outlet through all these different ventures so far. And I want to be that outlet. I want to bring on the Shawn Kaplans, the NFL players, all that stuff. But I have to do it in a high-rise apartment because we're called higher. And there's a lot of symbolism in there.
Wow.
Because like I said, during my senior year of high school, I looked at that apartment. I said, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
A few months later, I am there. So, yeah, there's just a lot of symbolism there.
Pretty cool.
And I want to be that outlet for these individuals that feel as if they're called higher, because there's only so much I can talk about and give.
Yep.
But there's stuff you have that I can never give.
Absolutely.
And there's stuff Nick has, or the NFL players, or even, like you said, the guy that was in prison. And I want to create that outlet for people.
And just creating that outlet or that opportunity or platform that people can step onto, you're going to inspire them, and they're probably going to run towards
Exactly.
their higher calling.
Exactly.
You know, and maybe they'll go start their YouTube, their podcast, and have the courage to do
Exactly.
so. You know, that's pretty damn cool. What does hope dealing mean to you?
Hope dealing.
Yeah.
That's something I'm still figuring out. But I'll say this, and I rarely talk about this to people, but during that moment at my lowest, once again, I knew I wanted to be great, but I knew I was going to be great. And it's something not a lot of people understand, but I just knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
But with that, I told myself I was never going to be the guru. Yes, I might have nice things, but if I have nice things, I'm going to show you how it got there, and that I'm just a vessel of God, and that it's a reflection. If I post me with a Rolex, it's not going to be like, look, I got this Rolex.
Yeah.
Like, screw you guys. It's going to be like, no, this is hard work. This is dedication. This is 20-hour work days. That's how I want people to see it. So dealing hope for me is, I'm going to keep persistently pursuing my full potential, but I'm going to leave that roadmap behind. And I believe that's what separated me apart from most YouTubers and gurus so far is I get DMs on the daily. I don't respond to all of them because some of them are like, make me money. I'm like, all right, calm down.
Yeah.
But the kids that take time to say like, Nick, your videos inspire me, and there's something about you that I can't explain that is so different from anyone else. Like everyone feels connected to me, and it's not me. Once again, it's God. It's just a vessel. But dealing hope is persistently pursuing my full potential, but showing everyone else that you can do it too.
Yeah.
And I believe, and I say this humbly, that separates me apart is I am at the same level as everyone. I'm never going to be higher.
Right.
I'm never going to be greater. My journey might seem that way, but we all have our own journeys, right? And I tell everyone, so I have a short form mastermind where I have 14-year-olds making over $1,000 a month.
Wow.
But every time we get on the call, I say, listen, I'm not greater than you. I might have made all this money and like have all these results. Bro, I'm here with you.
Right.
And I tell them, I say, there's things you're going to fail that I never even knew, and I'm going to learn, and we're going to grow together.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing is like being humble. I feel like that's how you deal hope. Because if I'm not humble to these individuals, or people aren't humble to me, I see them as greater, and then I have no hope because I feel inferior.
Yeah, I think that the saying, the teacher becomes the student. Like you probably learn as much from them sometimes as what you're teaching them.
100%.
Right? That they're learning from
100%.
you. You bring up a good point because, in truth and transparency, for years, like I didn't know how to enjoy any of my success.
Mm-hmm.
I would suppress it. Like I would hide it.
Yeah.
And, when I was growing up, my mom used to clean big houses that we would go to. She'd clean their toilets, floors, all that. She was a house cleaner. And she'd take me with her, and I'd be like sitting on their couch, or I'd just be walking around outside or whatever. Well, I'd get to see these people's fancy cars.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy that had a red Porsche, and I remember sitting in it one time, and because I'd looked at it for weeks on end, and I was like, I'm just gonna sit in it one day.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sitting in it, and all of a sudden the garage door opened, and I froze.
Oh shoot.
And he came, and it was him, and he was coming home. And instead of just being playful or, hey, do you like the car, whatever, I will never forget how he opened up that door and he pointed at me and he's like, get out of my car. He goes, don't you ever get in my car ever again.
Wow.
And it was almost at that moment that I feel like there was a chip that was planted that was like, you watch what I'm going to do with this.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
But I was so petrified that symbolized to me, like that's what people think of you when you have nice things. Well, then there was this, I always wanted to have cars, and my dream car was an Audi R8. And so about 6 years ago, I was like, you know what? I really want to get this car, but I struggled with it for months because I talked to people and I was like, what are people going to think? What are they going to think? Whatever. And like my one friend said something, he goes, those that are your friends and have known your journey that you've been on and how hard you've worked, they won't think of that. They'll look at you and say, if he can do it, I can do it too. Right? Yeah. So I bought that damn car, and then one day I was at the gas station. I took a picture of it, right? And I was standing near it or whatever, and I posted on my social. The very first comment that popped up, it was a dude saying, flex much?
Mm.
And That's all he said. Well, I didn't have to say anything. My friends came to my defense. Clearly, you don't know Shawn and know the journey he's been on or how hard he's worked for it.
Right.
And I was so devastated by that because I wanted what you talked about, which is like, I would only post a picture of that or share something in my life that would allow somebody else to say, man, dude, if he did that, then I know I can do that.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's why you do it, right?
100%.
But I'm petrified of people perceiving me as being the guy who flex much, right? But anytime that you're going to put yourself out there to inspire people, one thing I've just gotten over and I've learned to be comfortable with is there's going to be people that are on both sides of the camp. People that are going to misperceive you and the people that are not going to misperceive you, and they're going to see your true heart. And you just have to take that chance.
100%. I think it's a very important thing, and we all struggle with it, but on your journey of hope and creating yourself is really finding your confidence in yourself.
Yeah.
Because like for me, I mean, I've done the yachts, I've done the Miami stuff. I got invited to a $50 million mansion event, which I'm going to go to. And there's kids there that were millionaires at 16. I didn't know anything about money at 16. And once again, I've been called higher, as we all are called higher in different areas. But if I don't know who I am and I'm in those rooms, it's game over for me. Right. But at the same time, it's like if I don't know who I am and my intentions when I post these things, if I post these things, then it's game over for me mentally. And like you said, those comments will destroy you and deter you from where you need to go. And on top of that too, like I said, I've done all that stuff. I'd find no joy in it at all. Like I find dopamine,
right,
but it does not fulfill me at all in a good way. I don't let it fulfill me.
Good.
And I want people, when I post these things as well, that's the part of hope is like, this will not fulfill you. What will fulfill you is a relationship with God, knowing who you are and providing value to people. Because once again, I see it. I've 16-year-olds with Lamborghinis.
Yeah.
I know for a fact at the end of the day, they're not fulfilled because they don't know who they are and they do everything just to get. So those two things are very important.
You're a wise man at beyond your years. Unfortunately, I was the opposite. I was almost 40 years old before I really realized I was like, man, this stuff's not going to make me happy.
Yeah.
But I never had anybody to really teach me along the ways, and I didn't have any of it. So I had to at least taste it.
Right.
But I got to the point in my life quickly where I was like, actually, somebody stepped into my life and he said, you know, man, I'm going to tell you something because I love you. And I don't think a lot of people will tell you this. And I said, what's that? And he goes, there's 7 billion people on the planet. Some will like you. Some won't like you. So what? He goes, but if you end up continuing to go around and trying to please everybody and get everybody to like you, he goes, you're going to end up just like your father. And he was damn right. Yeah. Like that's what my father did. Like he worried so much about what people thought and tried to make them happy that he ultimately, took his own life over that.
Yeah.
Disappointing other people. He was so tired of disappointing other people that he took his own life because he felt like the world would be better without him.
Absolutely.
And when my friend said that to me, that was a pivot shift in my life. I was like, I don't need the partying, the work, the nice things, the clothes. Like, yeah, that's nice. Like I enjoy that. But at the same time, like that's not why you should be doing it.
Right.
You should be doing it for a deeper purpose, deeper calling, a more due north. In Boy Scouts, I remember they would always tell you don't get a compass near a magnet. Because if you got it near a magnet, what would happen is it would throw it off. It wouldn't really show north. And I think of you going to a party like that and like having your magnet knock your compass off, or your compass is due north. It's dialed in.
Right.
And when you go out in that wilderness, like that thing will guide you. Like you'll know when it's time to go home.
Right.
You'll know when it's time to say no to something. You'll know when it's time to cut off a conversation because it's not going in a direction that that intuition and discernment that the Lord will give you.
Absolutely.
And I wish more people would tap into that, especially at an earlier age.
Yeah, I have a really off-topic question. So last time I did a podcast with Haley Timberlake, she's drop shipping. She's amazing at it. She's crushed it. And she's what I would call a high-value woman. And so I asked her this question. I'm going to ask it for you. So there's a lot of young guys my age, younger, a little bit older, who are persistently pursuing their full potential.
Yep.
They're in the gym. They're doing all this stuff. And this goes along with your identity crisis. We're in a day and age where a lot of guys and a lot of females are just like doing tons of things for temporary satisfaction, and they'll never